The story of Macbeth begins with a trio of witches. It's an eerie kind of entrance or beginning to the whole story of Macbeth. After the witches, it moves to explaining that two invading armies were defeated. Now, the invading armies were defeated by General Macbeth and then the other general, Banquo. This is significant because most of the story in general has to do with power. So defeating the enemies obviously takes a part in this because it's beginning the struggle about power, because that's what the entire thing is about. After the battles, Macbeth and Banquo find the witches. They cross paths from the witches from the beginning of the story. This sets the entire story. Now, it sets the entire story because in the encounter, the three witches prophesy Macbeth becoming king. They also prophesy Banquo and his ancestors becoming the heir to the throne. Now, this is very significant because the entire story is about struggle for power. So, in the beginning, the witches setting up the fact that Macbeth will become the king in general, that puts it in his mind that he's going to accomplish that. He's going to struggle for power and gain what he wants. After this, Lady Macbeth tries to convince Macbeth that becoming king is obviously a good thing and that it's going to happen because the witches prophesied it. And he's a little bit skeptical, but then he starts to see patterns that would go along with that theory. And Lady Macbeth convinces Macbeth that he should kill Duncan to make sure it happens and that he becomes king. And at first, Macbeth was skeptical of this idea, but then he gets persuaded by her. And eventually he kills Duncan. Then, afterwards, he's so paranoid that Banquo's heirs could take over the throne that he sets out them to be killed as well. And this is obviously significant because they had kind of worked together in the beginning. They had been with each other, they had crossed paths with the witches, they had worked together to defeat the invading armies, and he kind of turned on him. He was so hungry for power that he just made sure that nobody stood in his way. Lady Macbeth afterwards felt regret about the things that she convinced Macbeth, and she believed that she was responsible for the deaths taking place. She's so afraid and paranoid and regretful that she ends up killing herself. The story then continues with Macbeth's paranoia of the throne being taken, and he's constantly in action about destroying the next threat to the throne. The next threat in question is Macduff. Macbeth then has Macduff's family executed, and obviously Macduff doesn't like that. He's seeking revenge. So he decides to go after Macbeth, and they battle. And eventually Macbeth realizes that he's not going to win this battle, but they continue to fight anyways because he's so hungry for power. It's such a power struggle that they continue until the end, and Macduff kills and beheads Macbeth. Now, the setting of Macbeth plays a key role in the story. The story is set in 11th century Scotland. Now, during this time, in 11th century Scotland, there was a lot of controversy over who would be the ruler. And the funny thing is that the struggle fits right along with Macbeth. Obviously, because Macbeth is completely about the struggle for power. That's why so many people end up dying, because it's all about the struggle for power. The setting also having a dark and dreary land and people also sets up the audience for the darkness that's seen throughout the story. And this darkness is obviously the killing, the death, the power hungriness that's seen. And overall, the setting is directly preparing the audience for this kind of dark and sad mood that comes with the whole story. it also sets the audience up for the guilt that comes with the decisions and by the characters. Like Lady Macbeth, she decided she would convince Macbeth that he should kill people, and then she's so overcome by her guilt that she can't take it anymore, and she ends up killing herself. Now, the entire play is a struggle for power, and this is reflected from the struggle for power seen in 11th century Scotland. This struggle for power in the story is first seen in the defeating of the invading armies, obviously, because power, like they were trying to invade, and obviously they stopped them. Then, the power struggle is set up for the rest of the story in the witch's prophecy, because this prophecy is about Macbeth becoming king, and that sets up his, path for destroying anything in his way to get what he wants. Everything in the story is centered around these power-hungry points that the setting establishes. It continues on as Macbeth is paranoid about maintaining power, and it drives him to more and more killing, just because he wants to maintain and keep the power that he has. And it's all directly from the witch's prophecy. He hadn't even, had this in his mind until the witches decided, you're gonna be king, and now he's like, I must kill everyone so that I am king forever. And in the end, Macduff kills Macbeth over one thing and one thing only: power. This is all reflected and revealed by Scotland's struggle for power in the 11th century, because the struggle for power is just seen throughout the entire story. That's what the most of it is about. This is why the setting is so important to the story. The setting is the most important aspect of Macbeth. This is because it directly sets up the audience for the whole story. It just lets them know, this is where the story's going, because, this is where it took place. And it makes sense because it's like a parallel right along with the actual history and the actual situation of Scotland at the time. The uncertainty and the wanting for power that was taking place in Scotland just carried right over into Macbeth. It highlights the events that are taking place in the story because the setting is so important. The setting is completely what the story reflects. The setting is just, it's dark, it's dreary, it's about the struggle for power, and that's exactly what Macbeth is. It goes into the sad and dark places, just like Scotland. It goes into the struggle for ruling, and it's just the same. The dark and dreary land reflects the dark parts of the entire story. And these dark parts include the death and the killing and the guilt that everybody feels in the story. It's so, raw with emotion. The struggle for power in 11th century Scotland reflects the struggle for power seen in Macbeth. The story is gory and hardcore because of these aspects. It's because of the struggle that's being seen, and it's because of how the land was at the time. And everything in the setting is what sets up the audience for the actual story. The setting so very closely parallels the story that it goes right along with it. The setting is what influences every part of the story. And this is seen countless times throughout the story because everything that takes place is about power. Lady Macbeth convinces Macbeth to kill someone because she wants power for her husband. Obviously, it's not for herself, but she wants that for her husband. And it's obviously, a huge deal to everyone in the story because at the beginning starts with the invading and then the killing, and then there's just so much darkness and goriness and guilt, and it's all because of the setting. And that's why it's the most important part of Macbeth. Yes, it is the most important part of Macbeth. it's seen throughout the entire story. But yes, thank you for watching.